G'day guys, I'm Ryan, your Chief Espresso Officer, and today I'm going to take you through the world of Rwanda and explore the coffee that grows in this very special country. Rwanda is this small country nestled amongst a whole lot of other countries, so it's actually landlocked, but it's where the Great Lakes and East Africa converge. And even though, geographically speaking, the country of Rwanda could fit into Australia or America almost 300 times, don't let the size of the country fool you. They actually produce about 30 times more coffee than we do here in Australia, with 20,000 metric tons being produced per year on average, and Australia only doing about 600. Even though half of Australia almost sits perfectly in that coffee belt. The entirety of the country is located about 1,500 meters above sea level and goes up to 2,500 meters above sea level, which makes it perfect for growing strictly high-grown coffee, or strictly hard beans, it's sometimes referred to. And the mountainous region that it occurs around the countryside is often referred to as the land of 1,000 hills. Now, I'm sure many of you are aware of the horrible past that Rwanda has suffered in 1994 with the genocide of over 1 million people. And even though it's a big part of Rwanda's history, I think an even bigger part is being rewritten at the moment, and that's the coming together and strengthening of the country through the coffee industry. And the farmers all around the country producing some of the most delicious and highest quality coffees in the world now. And that is what we're celebrating today. Coffee was first introduced to Rwanda in the 1930s by Belgium, but the Belgian government didn't approach it correctly, and they forced farmers to plant an abundance of trees, which led to a low quality and a low price trap. And for many years, it held the country back from really producing that high quality specialty coffee that we now know they can produce. Incidentally, after the genocide in '94, the coffee farms were all left dormant to grow. And whilst neighbouring countries ripped out their coffee trees to plant in higher yielding coffee trees with leaf rust resistance and insect resistant trees, they were a lower quality. And in Rwanda, the Rwandese people, as they started to go back to the farms in the early 2000s, were using the bourbon trees, which were a higher quality tree. And now, bourbon coffee trees are highly sought after for their amazing flavors. So then, Rwanda had become a specialty coffee producing country and gained an accidental advantage. And while low quality coffee prices fell, the specialty quality coffee prices remained solid, and this created the perfect environment for Rwanda to keep striving for greater quality coffee. And in the last 10 years, the profits for the farmers' kilo of coffee have gone up by 17.5 times, which means now they're able to send their children to school, they're able to rebuild their homes and make them better, and they're able to reinvest money back into their own farms. Because the country is so densely populated, and there's about 12 million people in Rwanda, there's about 500,000 farmers of coffee. And they only get a small lot of land to grow coffee trees on, about 800 square meters or just under an acre. And so this means they're only able to produce about 45 kilos of coffee each harvest, which is not a lot if you're going to sustain a coffee business. So they have to come together as a co-op and usually bring them to one of the 300 washing stations around the countryside to get their coffees produced to be exported to people as lucky as us. Now let's talk about the coffee itself. We already mentioned bourbon, and that makes up about 95% of the coffee varieties grown in Rwanda. So if you're drinking Rwandan coffee right now, chances are that it's of the bourbon variety. If it isn't, you're one of the very few people who are lucky enough to get their hands on one of the typica, it's probably the other most common one, or some of the hybrid ones. But a lot of them aren't very easy to grow and produce, and a lot of people don't have the money to support growing these other hybrid varieties, so they revert back to bourbon. And what's very interesting is because of the political history of coffee, Rwandans do not drink coffee themselves, they mostly drink tea. So we are actually getting the best of the best that's coming out of Rwanda. Now we've already talked about the whole country being at a higher elevation, and the strictly high-grown beans that it produces, or the strictly hard beans. And the reason behind that, if you haven't seen any of my other videos, strictly high-grown or strictly hard bean is a terminology used for coffee grown at a really high altitude. And what this does, it allows all of the complex sugars in the cherries to slowly grow, meaning that the beans are a lot harder and they're a lot more intense and sweet, which is beautiful if you love drinking black coffee or you love drinking that deep, full-bodied coffee that just cuts through the milk. And we also talked about how Rwanda sits at the convergence of the Great Lakes, so there's an abundance of water there, and they use this water to wash their coffees, which gives that clean, crisp taste. Now, being mostly bourbon variety, you're gonna find flavors of red berries and currants and chocolates, with the aftertaste of caramels and white chocolate. And they won't vary from farm to farm, region to region greatly, because they're all coming from that same variety. However, different climates in different soils, different processing, different milling stations, and different harvest times will lend itself to a varying degree of different coffees. So I'm always excited when we get to try different Rwandan coffees, because they are truly unique, even though they are of the same variety. And in terms of mouthfeel and texture, it's a very silky, buttery sort of texture on your tongue. And caramelized sugars, even some cloves and spices and cinnamon. And these sorts of flavors always remind me, because they're very similar, of those Ethiopian coffees that I love so much. And you might find the acidity is quite high and bright in Rwandan coffees. So you're gonna see flavors, lots of floral and citrusy sort of flavors in the acidity. And might be even reminiscence of a lemonade or like a sparkling water. Because of the high altitude and the way that the beans grow so slowly, it does lend itself to a higher acidity, similar to those of Kenya. And if you're interested in learning more about the coffees that we have in range, jump on the store, coffeebeansdelivered.com.au, and you can check out the coffees from all around the world. We're always sourcing in new coffees, and we always love to do videos on our specific coffees. And if you want to, you can check out the specific lot that we just got in from Rwanda. But otherwise, stay tuned, subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on social media. I'm Ryan, your Chief Espresso Officer. Enjoy your brew.